Alright, good morning guys. Today I'm going to be continuing our lesson on graphing lines. This is graphing lines part 2. And by the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to graph linear equations written in point-slope form. So today we're going to be discussing point-slope form. One thing we have to remember from geometry is that you learn that you need at least 2 points to make a line, remember, in geometry. But if we're graphing on paper, we can use more than 2 lines, especially if we want to keep, our lines straight. We can also use a ruler. So if you have a ruler, feel free to use that as well. So I'm going to make a point here about mentioning that we're going to use, 3 points if graphing on paper. Okay, but since we're going to be using Mastery Connect again, remember Mastery Connect, you only need 2 points. Okay, and so I'll keep mentioning that again and again as we go through the lesson. All right, so let's start off. Point slope form. This is different from the last lesson when we talked about slope intercept form. Okay, so point slope form has an equation that looks like this. Okay, and I try to color code here where x1 and y1 are the coordinates for the point that's given in the equation, and then m, if you remember, is the slope. So this is the point, and m is the slope. Okay, and the first thing that we want to graph when we're graphing in this form is we want to make sure and graph the point first. Graph the point, and we put x1, y1. We're going to graph that point first. First, graph the point. Second, we're going to graph the other point using the slope. So I'm going to actually color code this. So I'll put this in purple up here, the point. Okay, so first we're going to graph the point x1, y1, which is given to us in the equation. Then we're going to graph the other point using the slope. So we need 2 points. So we're going to get 1 point from the initial point that was given in the equation, and then we're going to get the second point by following the directions of the slope. Okay. So let's go ahead and start on our first example. And as I'm going through this, feel free to pause at any point in the lesson, or rewind, or wherever you want to go to. And if you miss something, you can always rewind or pause so you can see what was done in the problem. So these examples, the instructions are: graph each linear equation written in point-slope form. Graphs must contain at least 3 visible points. Okay, and again, what we're talking about here, just remember, if we're graphing, this is for graphing on paper, right? But I'll put this in red. But on Mastery Connect, use 2 points. Okay. All right, so where we're graphing the point, we have to kind of remember. Let me go ahead and put on there the equation. Let me color code. It's slope parentheses x minus x1. Oh, put that in black. Okay. So notice that in the equation, there's a minus here, right? And there's a minus here. But in the problem, there's a plus sign in front of the 1, and there's a plus sign in front of the 3. So notice that only y1 and x1 are the points that we want to fill in. So my question is, what does y1 have to be so that when it has a negative in front of it, will become a positive? What does y1 have to be so that when I put a negative in front of it, it'll become a positive? And so what I want you guys to see is I can rewrite this equation in the following way. I'm trying to color code so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This is minus 3, close parentheses. Okay, so if we look at the equation, we see that, in order to get a positive one, right, what's a negative times a negative? A positive, right? In order to get a positive 3, we have to put a negative and a negative. So that means that y1 and x1 are negative 1 and negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to put here that our point is going to be x1 is negative 3, comma, y1 is negative 1, and our slope we could put it as m. Our slope m is 3 over 2. Okay. So the way I like to think of it is, if the equation is in this form, we're going to take the opposite values next to the y and next to the x, and those two values are going to be my x1 and my y1. x1, y1. Okay. All right. Now, step 1, graph the points. We're going to graph this point first. And I like to graph with blue. So we're going to look for negative 3, negative 1. So starting in the center, we go to the left 3, 1, 2, 3, and we go down 1. And so our first point is going to be here. And then the slope tells us the direction where to go, right? So if I have 3 and a 2, remember it's rise over run. So 3 tells me to go up 3. And the 2 tells me to go to the right 2. So let's do that. Let's go up 3. 1, 2, 3. And then to the right 2. 1, 2. All right. All right, and remember, when we're graphing on paper, since I'm graphing on paper, we're going to do one more point, 3 points in total, right? But on Mastery Connect, all you need are 2 points. Okay? So we're going to go up 3 and to the right 2. This is my third point. And then I'm going to get my ruler. and connect these points. All right. Now, again, I want to mention it again. If you put more than 2 points on Mastery Connect, it's going to count it wrong. So make sure that you're only clicking 2 points. You can click this point, -3, 1, and the second point when we went up 3 and to the right 2. Okay? Let's go look at the next example. And I always like to, for you guys, I like to rewrite the equation, and I like to color code things so that we can see what we're working with. Okay. All right, so if we notice, the example has y minus 2, my equation has y minus y1. So, can we agree that this number is going to be this number? That y1 is 2. So if I'm looking at my point, if I want to know what the point's going to be, I want to know what x1 is going to be and what y1 is going to be. So right now, we can see that 2 is going to be my y1. And remember, going back to the first example, you can also think of it as we were going to put the opposite number. Okay, so if it says y minus 2, instead of -2, we're going to say 2 is my y coordinate. Okay. What's going to be my x1? Well, it says +5, but remember, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to say the opposite value. So not +5, but -5. So this is my point, -5, 2. Now, let me go back to the previous example so we remember, right? Look at the previous example. What was my x1? It was -3, right? But what was it originally written in the example? It was +3, right? My y1 is -1, but in the example, it was written as +1. And that's just because of this equation. This equation already has negatives in it, so that changes the sign of the numbers. And this rule is only for point-slope form. Okay? So just think of that, opposites. Opposite numbers. Right? What's the opposite of -2? +2. What's the opposite of +5? -5. All right. Let me go ahead and erase this blue mark here. I don't want it to confuse you guys. Okay, now what's going to be my slope? Well, I noticed that the number in front of the parentheses is going to be my slope. So my slope is going to be -1/3. I know some students were asking me, where should the negative go? Should it be with the 1 or the 3? You can pick, but I always say, you can pick, but first off, graph the one where the top is negative and the bottom's positive. So if the 1 is negative, that means I'm going to go down 1, and the 3 is telling me to go to the right 3. Okay. So let's graph it. And again, I like to use blue. First, we're going to graph the point, the purple one. So -5, 2 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up 2. So it's going to be right here. Right here, right? Because I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. Okay. What's my second step? What am I going to graph? Secondly, I'm going to use the slope, right? So the slope tells me to go down 1 and to the right 1, 2, 3. And so for Mastery Connect, all you need to click are these 2 points. Let me go ahead and erase my steps here. This is a little bit smaller. All right, all I'm going to graph are these 2 points. Now, since I'm graphing on paper, I'm going to graph 3 points. But on Mastery Connect, you're going to click on 2 points. If I want to draw a third point, I'm going to go down 1, and then go to the right 1, 2, 3. So that's my third point here. And I can do that again. And then I'll take out my ruler and connect these points. Let's see. Oh. Let's see if it'll come out. Just lining up my ruler. Oops, kind of crooked. You know what, let me do that again. All right. All right, so that's example 2. 2 more to go. Just writing out the equation again. So I need to figure out what my point's going to be. I need 2 numbers, right? An x and a y. We call it x1 and y1. So what's going to be my x1? Well, I see a minus 1 here. So what's the opposite of minus 1? Positive 1. Positive 1. Let's look at the y. I have a plus 4 here. So what's the opposite of a positive 4? A negative 4. All right, and then the second item that I need to identify is the slope. But wait, I noticed that in the equation, I have a negative in front. What do we assume is the number if there is no number given, right? If we just have a negative. And we assume that there's a negative 1 here. So there's a negative 1 here. So that means my slope, the number in front of the parentheses, the number in front of this parentheses is negative 1. So this corresponds to my slope. So my slope is negative 1. And what's the number at the bottom of negative 1 if it's not given? Positive 1, right? So that means I'm going to go down 1 to the right 1. Down 1 to the right 1. First step, graph this point here. It's located at 1. Go 1 to the right and 4 down. And that's my first point. All right, and then to graph my second point, I'm going to use a slope. So the slope says go down 1 and to the right 1. So I'm going to go down 1 and to the right 1. And there's my second point. There's my third point. My fourth point, fifth point. Right. Since I'm graphing on paper, I can draw more points. But remember, you guys, you're just going to do 2 points on Mastery Connect. And so I'll get my ruler here. Okay. So that's my third line. And again, feel free to pause at any moment, go back in the explanation. And let's do one more. All right. So let me go ahead and draw or write out the equation that we're following. I call this the template, right? To make sure that it matches my template. Okay, so I need to identify a point, which is made up of x1 and y1. And I need to find the slope. Okay. I see that I have y minus 5. What's the opposite of minus 5? What's the opposite of negative 5? Positive 5, right? So that's my y1. My y1 is a positive 5, right? This value corresponds to this variable, right? So y1 is 5. Now what is my x1? I don't see two numbers. I just see 2x, right? Now, question, what if I write it like this? What's x minus 0? X, right? And so x minus 0 will become x. And what's 2 times x? Is 2x. So in a way, it's like there's a 0 there. So my x1 is 0. My x1 is 0. What's my, let me box it here. What's my m? What's the slope? What's the number in front of the x? 2, right? And what's the number underneath 2 if there's nothing given? We assume that there's a 1 underneath, right? So that means I'm going to go up 2 and to the right 1. Up 2 and to the right 1. So we're going to graph the point first. 0, 5, graph this point. So that's located 0, 0, 5 up here. Wait a minute, isn't this the y-intercept? I guess it is, right? And I'll show you what I mean in a little bit, but okay, so we're at 0, 5. We're at 0, 5, and the slope tells me to go up 2 and to the right 1. But I ran out of space, right? Because if I go up 2 and to the right 1, I might be somewhere here. But remember, I can go in the opposite direction. Like the lesson from last class, I can go in the opposite direction. So I can also go down 2 1, 2, and to the left 1. I can go in the opposite direction of the slope. Because remember we discussed that a positive divided by a positive is a positive, right? But in math you can also have a negative divided by a negative is also a positive. And if that's the case, that means we're going to go down 2 and to the left 1. So I can go 1, 2, 1. I can go down 2 and to the left 1. Or if going from the starting point, I can go up 2 and to the right 1. But these points are still on the same line. Notice that. Go 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 1. Okay. And I keep that going, and then I can connect it with a ruler. There we go. All right. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about in this problem. Remember, well, if we go back to the problem, I just want to write it out, just write it at the bottom here. Right, so this was the problem that I gave you, that was given at the beginning. This is the example, right? Now, we can solve for y, and it'll look like the problems from the last class. What I mean by solve for y is, can I get y by itself? In other words, how can I move this minus 5? What's the opposite of minus 5? Subtracting 5. The opposite is adding 5, right? So if I add 5 on both sides of the equation, you should notice that these two will cancel here. And I end up with y equals 2x plus 5. And if you remember, we worked with the slope-intercept form, and so this is slope-intercept form. And we said for slope-intercept form, we can graph the y-intercept first. This is where the line crosses the y-axis, right? And where did this line cross the y-axis? At 5. At 5. And then we can use the slope to go, up 2 to the right 1 or down 2 to the left 1. So sometimes this will happen. Sometimes you're able to change point slope form into slope intercept form. And it should give you the same line because it's the same equation, just a different way of looking at it. All right, so that concludes my lesson. Again, if you have any questions, we can discuss them in our Zoom session. But go ahead and try out the assignment that I gave you as a resource, and then we'll discuss it in class next time. But thank you for joining me. Have a great day, and I'll see you in class.